The case of Alexandria Kostrel. Alexandria, Ally Kostrel was born on September 11, 1997, in St. Louis, Missouri. From a young age, her warm and caring personality attracted people to her. She possessed a remarkable ability to make others feel comfortable and joyful, which made her a beloved figure in her community. Ally's friendly disposition allowed her to connect with individuals from all walks of life. She was never hesitant to approach someone new and start a conversation. Her kind and compassionate nature was apparent in her readiness to help others, whether by offering assistance or simply listening to those in need. During her time at Lindbergh High School, Ally was an active student who participated in track and cheerleading. It was there that she met her best friend, Maddie Norris, and they established a lifelong bond. Their friendship was founded on mutual trust and a profound emotional connection, going beyond a typical friendship to become more like sisters. After graduating from high school, she enrolled at the University of Mississippi, also known as Ole Miss, in Oxford, Mississippi. Although several boys had asked her to prom, she did not have a date. Fortunately, her friend Maddie stepped in and offered to accompany her. At Ole Miss, Ally joined the Alpha Phi sorority as a founding member and became the president of the Ole Miss Golf Club. She also immersed herself in the university's rich traditions, including its mascot, the Ole Miss Rebels. At a campus party, Ally met Eliza Brick, and they instantly connected as if they had known each other for years. Ally's passion for capturing stunning sunset photographs became a personal mission. One evening, while at a bar in downtown Oxford, Ally met Brandon Thidel from Fort Worth, Texas. She found him attractive and developed a crush on him. However, Brandon's actions ultimately hurt Ally, as she had trusted him to make an effort to connect with her and her best friend, Maddie. In July 2019, Ally's parents, Cindy and Keith, visited her in Oxford for a few days before her senior year at Ole, Mississippi. They were eager to see their daughter thriving at the university and experience her life there. On their planned departure day, July 19th, Cindy called Ally around 7 p.m. Still half asleep from a nap, Ally mentioned her plans to go out with friends that evening. Unbeknownst to Cindy, this ordinary conversation would be her last with her daughter. About 30 minutes from Oxford lies Sardis Lake, a vast area known for its hunting camps and recreational sites. On June 20th, 2019, an officer was assigned to patrol the lake in the early morning hours when it was still dark and eerily quiet. While driving around the lake, the officer noticed something unusual near a picnic table. Upon closer examination, he was confronted with a grisly scene. A young woman's lifeless body, bearing at least 9 gunshot wounds. The discovery of the body, later identified as Ally at Sardis Lake, led authorities to notify her parents, Cindy and Keith. However, the couple was far away in St. Louis, unaware of the tragedy that had occurred. A late-night phone call shattered their peace, informing them of the devastating news that their daughter had been the victim of a homicide. After receiving the tragic news, Ally's friends turned to social media to mourn her loss and demand justice. They created the hashtag #JusticeForAlly to unite their voices and amplify their calls for justice. In their posts, Ally's friends shared joyful memories of her and the positive impact she had on their lives. These heartfelt tributes were intended to celebrate Ally's memory and provide comfort to her family. After Ally's tragic murder, her friends and community grieved the loss of a vibrant and joyful individual. Bissandra Kendrick, a recent University of Mississippi graduate and close friend, expressed her sorrow. Brash, another recent graduate who worked in student housing, described Ally as someone with infectious happiness and a positive outlook. According to Brash, Ally always wore a big smile, reflecting her bright spirit. Brash had met Ally while working as a community desk assistant in Crosby Hall, the largest residence hall on campus. Ally would often stop by to chat with Brash while they were on duty. Brash remembered Ally as a sweet girl who lived life to the fullest and treasured every moment. Ally's sorority, Alpha Phi, released a statement after her murder, expressing shock and sadness at the loss of one of their members. They extended their deepest sympathies to Ally's family during this incredibly difficult time and hoped for comfort for their sisters. Anna Pachow, another close friend from the University of Mississippi, posted on Facebook to share her heartfelt condolences over the loss of her friend. She described Ally as the most genuine and uplifting person she had ever known, highlighting the profound impact Ally had on the lives of those fortunate enough to have met her. Emily Groh, a fellow cheerleader with Ally at Lindbergh High School, took to Twitter to express her shock and sadness over Ally's murder. She cherished the time they had spent together on the squad, praising Ally's bright and positive attitude. Emily regretted not having had the opportunity to know Ally better. At the Sardis Lake crime scene, where Ally's body was discovered, investigators found several cans of White Claw seltzer and .40 caliber shell casings scattered on the ground. A ballistic expert was called in to analyze the scene and reconstruct the events. The expert's findings indicated that the killer had initially sat across from Ally on the picnic table benches when firing the first shot. However, after the first shot, the killer stood and began circling the table, moving closer to Ally with each step. The expert theorized that with each step, the killer fired at Ally again. One of the rounds missed its target and became lodged in the wooden picnic table. Crime scene investigators searched Ally's apartment for any clues that could help identify and apprehend her killer. During the search, they found her Apple Watch, but surprisingly, her phone was missing. Yet, some messages from the previous night had mysteriously synced with her watch. Investigators reviewed the messages and discovered that Ally had been in extensive conversation with Brandon. The messages revealed that Ally and Brandon had planned to meet. The detective leading Ally's murder investigation contacted Brandon on Sunday, the day after her murder, requesting he come to the police station for an interview. Brandon told the detective he was unavailable that day, but offered to meet the following morning at 8:30 a.m. However, Brandon did not appear for the scheduled interview. After his failure to show, police began tracking his cell phone. The phone's location data indicated that Brandon was driving on Interstate 55 toward Memphis. Authorities issued an arrest warrant for Brandon, suspecting he was fleeing, and broadcast a "Be on the lookout" alert for his vehicle, which was easily identifiable due to its distinctive license plate. 2 hours later, the Memphis Fugitive Task Force spotted Brandon's car at a gas station, where he was sitting by a pump. The agents apprehended Brandon and notified Mississippi authorities. Upon searching Brandon's vehicle, investigators found a .40 caliber firearm. Additionally, when Brandon exited the car, authorities noticed bloodstains on his clothing. Once Brandon was arrested and extradited to Mississippi, detectives began reconstructing his activities in the days leading up to Ally's murder. On Saturday, July 20th, Brandon spent the day with friends, going bowling. The following day, he visited another friend's house, bringing a six-pack of beer and his .40 caliber gun. The friend reported that they talked for a while, but when he awoke on Monday, Brandon had already left. During the investigation, detectives discovered that Brandon had no prior history of physical fights or violent behavior. They also collected information from Brandon's friends and Ally's loved ones, who stated that the couple had met at a local bar in Oxford during their freshman year and had started dating casually. However, their relationship worsened during their sophomore year. Ally's loved ones observed that she became more emotionally invested in the relationship than Brandon, creating tension between them. This led Brandon to block Ally's attempts to contact him because she would often go out, get intoxicated, and call him. 1 year after their initial separation, Brandon and Ally rekindled their relationship during the summer before her senior year. They decided to give their relationship another chance and began dating again. However, their reunion was short-lived, as Ally was tragically murdered and Brandon was subsequently charged with capital murder, a crime that carries the death penalty. Capital murder is the most serious criminal offense, and the state alleged that Brandon kidnapped Ally by luring her to Sardis Lake. News of Brandon's arrest sent shockwaves through Oxford, with the details of Ally's murder widely reported. The arrest sparked widespread speculation and rumors among community members, who exchanged numerous theories. Reporters flooded the town, seeking interviews and information from those closest to Ally and Brandon. This media frenzy brought both positive and negative attention to Oxford, as outsiders observed with a mixture of fascination and concern. In September 2019, Brandon pleaded not guilty to Ally's murder. As detectives built their case, they reviewed the couple's text messages. In April 2019, 3 months before her murder, Ally was preparing for spring semester finals and considering the possibility of being pregnant. On April 14th, Ally sent Brandon a photo of an inconclusive home pregnancy test. Brandon responded by saying they would wait to confirm the pregnancy. However, if it were true, he opposed keeping the baby. He suggested Ally could take an abortion pill. Ally, however, was uncertain about ending the pregnancy. She mentioned the possibility of meeting someone who would love her and the baby. Despite Ally's hesitation, Brandon remained firm in his stance, telling Ally he was serious and that having a child would ruin his life. Detectives obtained CCTV footage showing Ally leaving a bar on Oxford Square around 11:45 p.m. on July 18th. Approximately an hour later, around 1:30 a.m., Ally met up with Brandon, who drove them to Sardis Lake. According to Brandon's lawyers, both Ally and Brandon had been drinking throughout the day. Brandon's lawyers claimed that when they arrived at Sardis Lake, they sat at a picnic table, listened to music, and at some point, Brandon got up to do drugs by his truck. He then returned to Ally, went back to his car, and retrieved his .40 caliber gun. A shooting allegedly occurred across the lake, according to Brandon's lawyer. After the incident, Brandon sat back down and conversed with Ally for a while. However, events suddenly took a deadly turn when Brandon shot and killed her. Brandon's lawyer contended that his actions were caused by intoxication from drugs and alcohol. Detectives and Ally's family viewed the incident differently. They suspected Brandon of murder because they believed he thought Ally was pregnant and that this would ruin his life. In their perspective, the killing was a deliberate, cold-blooded, and premeditated act. On August 27, 2021, Brandon accepted a plea deal, sparing him from the death penalty, and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Ally's loved ones, dressed in her favorite color pink, filled the courtroom to show their support. After the judge announced the sentence, Brandon addressed Ally's family, expressing remorse for his actions and asking for their forgiveness. He acknowledged the immense pain he had caused and hoped they could find it in their hearts to pardon him. Ally's autopsy report concluded that she was not pregnant at the time of her murder. However, this does not eliminate the possibility that Ally had been pregnant at some point. Ally's mother, Cindy, firmly believes that Ally was pregnant and lost the baby. A memorial was established at Sardis Lake, where Ally was murdered by her family and friends. Her parents, Cindy and Keith, hold on to memories of their daughter, even though the silence remains painful for them. Every time Ally's friends see a pink sunset, they think of her. They have dedicated themselves to keeping her memory alive, striving to spread her positivity and ensure she is never forgotten. Moving on to the next case. The case of Brianna Nugent. Brianna grew up in Hayden, Alabama, USA. Her friendly personality allowed her to make many friends. She did not focus on boys at school. Instead, she devoted herself to her studies with the goal of becoming a nurse. After graduating high school, she enrolled in a nursing program at Wallace Community College. There, she met Stephen Nix, who was known to enjoy drinking and gambling. He showed little concern for having a stable job and often behaved irresponsibly. Stephen worked as a cleaner at the medical center where Brianna was interning and seemed uninterested in improving his life. Despite their differences, they began dating, and at one point Brianna moved into his house, where he lived with his parents. However, after some time, Stephen admitted to Brianna that he was having an affair with a co-worker. This revelation shocked Brianna, prompting her to end the relationship. She then focused on her studies and successfully earned her nursing degree. During the following year, Stephen repeatedly tried to contact her, pleading for another chance and promising he would never cheat again. Eventually, Brianna relented and agreed to give him another opportunity. They later married, and both began working to save money for their first home. Problems began when Stephen lost his job as a cleaner. He attempted to find another job, but struggled to maintain any position for long. After several attempts, he eventually stopped looking for work altogether. His daily routine began to resemble that of a teenager. He spent his nights playing computer games and slept until the evening. Although Brianna had a good income, Stephen, who was not contributing financially, took control of the family budget. Brianna had to ask him for every dollar she needed for basic necessities, often pleading with him even for essential items and food. However, Stephen did not control his own spending, eventually accumulating debt of about $50,000. To resolve this, he persuaded Brianna to declare bankruptcy. At that point, he had such control over her that she felt unable to refuse. In 2019, they followed through with the plan, eliminating the debts, but it took a severe toll on Brianna, leaving her morally exhausted. The stress caused by Stephen led Brianna into depression, requiring expensive medications. After a few months, she was offered a life insurance policy at work, which depended on her income as a nurse. When she mentioned it to Stephen, he agreed it was a good idea. By February 2020, Stephen remained unemployed and heavily reliant on Brianna. She began to suspect he might betray her again and feared he was using illegal drugs. To protect herself, Brianna hid her medications from him, but he continued to control her finances and her life. She felt trapped in a toxic relationship and was unsure how to escape, fearing her parents would judge her for investing time in someone unworthy. Ultimately, she confided only in a few close friends and her sister, sharing her intention to file for divorce. On March 2, 2020, around noon, Stephen called 911, claiming he found his wife, Brianna, unresponsive in the bathroom. The dispatchers instructed him to perform CPR, but throughout the call, he made no attempt to help her. Instead, he focused on recounting his version of the incident while ignoring their instructions. 5 minutes later, when paramedics arrived, a county sheriff's deputy and some of Stephen's family members were already present. It was unusual that an officer, who was supposed to be half an hour away, arrived even before the paramedics. The Stephen family lived far away, yet they reached his house very quickly. Soon after, Brianna's relatives also arrived. Stephen called his mother and sister at 12:20 p.m., after the ambulance had reached the house. He informed them that Brianna had ended her life and claimed he had witnessed similar incidents in the past. His family was shocked and rushed to the house. The medics attempted to revive Brianna, but it was too late. By the time the ambulance arrived, her body was already cold, indicating she had been dead for several hours. A syringe with an 18mm needle was found nearby, leading to speculation that Brianna might have died from an overdose of illegal drugs. Stephen explained that her body had already cooled when he found her. He said he had been preparing to go outside when he heard a loud noise from the bathroom, which sounded like something had fallen. He dismissed it, assuming it was just a mobile phone. After going shopping and returning about an hour later, he went upstairs and found his wife lifeless. Brianna's family rejected the idea that her death resulted from an overdose. They frequently communicated with her and saw no signs of substance abuse. As a nurse, Brianna underwent random screenings for alcohol and illegal drugs at work, and her results were consistently negative. Her colleagues also expressed disbelief, stating they could not imagine her using anything harmful. When Brianna's relatives arrived, they observed that Stephen appeared calm and not overly concerned about the situation. He was even cleaning the bathroom. However, his demeanor changed dramatically, and he became nervous once police officers arrived. While the police focused on investigating the crime scene, Stephen took a bag of collected garbage from the bathroom and loaded it into his pickup truck instead of disposing of it properly. When the police requested access to Brianna's mobile phone, Stephen refused. However, her sister was able to unlock the phone and discovered that Stephen's last call to Brianna had been made at 7:53 a.m., a time when he would normally still be asleep after a night of playing video games. When questioned by police, Stephen claimed he had called her number just to tease her, but did not explain the nature of the joke. Additionally, at 12:02 p.m., after calling 911, Stephen inexplicably sent a text message to Brianna. He could not explain why he would text someone who was already dead. He also refused to allow police to inspect his car. After learning that he had thrown the garbage bag away, the investigator had to return to the station to obtain a warrant, which inadvertently gave Stephen time to destroy evidence. He quickly disposed of the garbage and erased any traces of his actions. The crime scene was thoroughly cleaned by the next day, when Brianna's relatives arrived to gather items for the burial. Brianna's sister was shocked to discover that Brianna did not even own proper underwear. This seemed unusual and indicated that her husband did not allow her to spend money on herself. The following day, Stephen called Brianna's sister, Brittany, and invited her to his home for a discussion. When she arrived, his relatives were already there. He showed her 2 empty bottles of opioid painkillers and a bag of syringes. Stephen claimed he had found these items in a drawer among Brianna's belongings, suggesting she had died from a drug overdose due to a long-standing addiction. However, these medications required a prescription and certainly did not belong to Brianna. Brittany was convinced that Stephen was lying. After Brianna's death, Brittany and her mother went through Brianna's belongings and did not find anything missing. They would have noticed if anything had been taken. Then, Stephen showed Brittany another drawer containing Brianna's underwear. He claimed to have found additional evidence there that Brittany and her mother had overlooked. At that point, Brittany began to suspect that Stephen might have been involved in Brianna's death and no longer wanted to listen to him. Brittany went to the funeral home to style her deceased younger sister Brianna's hair and makeup, despite strong objections from Stephen's family. Upon arriving, she quickly understood why they were concerned. She discovered her sister's body covered in numerous fresh bruises and over 80 injection marks, some new and others beginning to heal. At the time of her death, Brianna was a certified nurse and knew how to administer injections properly. If she had a secret substance addiction, her level of bruising was still abnormal. Additionally, some injection sites were located in areas Brianna could not have reached herself without assistance. Signs of trauma were also found on her palms, resembling defensive wounds. The condition of the needle marks indicated they had been inflicted about 8 to 12 hours before her death. The nature of some injuries suggested that someone had restrained Brianna while administering the injections. This case could not be considered a suicide, and it felt as though the police were dismissive of Brianna. Brittany was able to take several photos of Brianna's body before being removed from the funeral home. She collected crucial evidence indicating that Brianna had died a tragic death. Brittany suspected that Brianna's husband, Stephen, was responsible. At Brianna's funeral, Stephen did not speak to anyone nor offer any greetings. He attempted to fake tears, but ultimately showed none, and many attendees noticed he appeared very unnatural. Several witnesses said Stephen bragged about connections that could help him evade justice. He even spoke with a mourner who turned out to be a police officer from another city, but quickly ended the conversation upon realizing this. At that time, no one knew that the deputy sheriff who had arrived at the scene before everyone else was related to Stephen. Brianna's sister discovered that this deputy was not included in the investigation records despite having full access to the crime scene. In October 2020, an investigator contacted Brianna's family to inform them that she had been the victim of a crime. The investigator suggested that she may have been killed because she witnessed another crime and became an unintended witness. However, this theory was never confirmed, and the investigation was eventually closed. Stephen continued to live in the home he shared with his late wife, Brianna. Just a few days after her death, Stephen's longtime mistress moved in with him. They even renamed Brianna's favorite dogs. He received $160,000 in life insurance money from Brianna's death. Stephen rarely left the house and continued to live a childish lifestyle, spending the insurance money on video games, pouring concrete in front of the house, buying expensive car parts, and acquiring weapons and gifts for his lover. Stephen showered his lover with lavish gifts, including jewelry and ostrich leather boots. However, he was unable to afford a tombstone for Brianna until 6 months later, and this only occurred after her relatives pressured him to do so. Brianna's family was appalled by his actions from the start. They sought justice for her by filing complaints with the police and other authorities, but their efforts were in vain. The case was closed, labeled as an accident, and no investigation was conducted to gather evidence or identify suspects. Brianna's family continued to appeal to higher authorities, requesting that the police reopen the investigation, but they were told it was under the jurisdiction of a different police station. The Brianna family is concerned that Stephen's connections are obstructing the investigation. Despite this, Brianna's sister remained persistent, and the case was reopened. Unfortunately, it was soon discovered that all the evidence had been lost and no thorough examinations had been conducted during prior investigations. Stephen is still withholding crucial case information from Brianna's sister and mother. Although he claims that access to the medical report from the pathologist is restricted until an official conclusion is reached, this is misleading. He is aware of the report's contents, raising questions about his motives. Eventually, the Brianna family hired a private detective who was able to uncover various materials. One significant find was video footage from a search of Stephen's car in the home, which showed him smiling brightly while leaning over Brianna's lifeless body. Following the public revelation of this footage, Stephen became fearful and installed security cameras around his house. Meanwhile, Brianna's sister Brittany continues to search for evidence that proves Stephen was involved in her younger sister's death. Brittany sent a photo of a package of fentanyl to Brianna's coworkers, who firmly stated that the medicine package did not come from the hospital, as they had never seen such drugs before. It was later revealed that a different drug from another manufacturer was used at their workplace, which had different packaging. This contradicted Stephen's earlier claim that Brianna had become addicted to drugs at work. Moreover, an official request from a medical institution confirmed that Brianna could not have stolen the drugs, as their records were strictly monitored. The large needles found in Brianna's home were not typically used for such drugs, and Brianna, as a nurse, was aware of this. Additionally, Brianna's family received a toxicology report about 4 months after her death. The report revealed that her body contained high levels of various psychotropic substances, including antidepressants and fentanyl, almost double the lethal dose. The Brianna family believes that Brianna, given her experience with medications, would not have made such a mistake or acted carelessly. When Brittany spoke to the medical examiner responsible for the autopsy and the cause of death determination, he mentioned that the conclusions in the autopsy report heavily relied on the circumstances surrounding the death. They reviewed reports from investigative agencies like the sheriff's office and the coroner's office. Brianna's death certificate states that the immediate cause of death was an overdose, and it categorizes her death as an accident. However, achieving justice remains difficult. The Brianna family initiated a petition to raise public awareness, which could have helped with legal and social expenses. Unfortunately, they only raised $5,000 instead of the needed $20,000, leaving the majority of the financial burden on Brianna's family. Moving on to the next case. Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz. In Cape Coral, Florida, during October 2019, Wade Wilson took the lives of Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz through a series of violent acts that left the community stunned. His violent nature and absence of remorse during and after the killings drew significant attention from both the media and the public. Wade Stephen Wilson, born on May 20, 1994, in Florida, was raised in Tallahassee. He experienced a troubled upbringing marked by legal issues and substance abuse. His violent conduct intensified over time, including prior convictions for burglary, assault, and 1 count of malicious wounding. On October 7, Christine Melton, 35, was discovered dead in her home, her body wrapped inside a rug. On that same day, Diane Ruiz, 43, was reported missing after leaving her workplace. Following a 3-day search, Diane's body was found in an isolated area on October 10, indicating that she had been brutally killed. Multiple witnesses confirmed seeing Wilson with both victims around the time of their deaths. Police also recovered DNA from both crime scenes, which quickly led them to identify Wilson as the main suspect. Wilson was arrested while driving Christine's car and carrying valuables that belonged to the victims. In November 2019, a grand jury officially indicted Wilson on 2 counts of first-degree murder, assault, burglary, motor vehicle theft, and related charges. Shortly after receiving the new charges, Wilson responded by saying that he did not commit the murders and that he was innocent. While incarcerated, Wilson continued communicating with news outlets, claiming he had been involved in a high-level human trafficking ring and that he groomed women for them. He further alleged that when he attempted to leave the organization the previous year, the group framed him for the murders as punishment. While awaiting trial for the killings, Wilson had several tattoos on his face, including multiple stitches and 2 swastikas. In October 2020, Wade and fellow inmate Joseph Katz attempted to escape but were captured by authorities. This resulted in 2 additional charges of attempted escape and criminal damage to property being added to Wilson's record. Some time later, in 2022, Wilson's trial began, revealing disturbing information about the double murder case following a deposition. Wilson pleaded not guilty to the murders. His father, Stephen Testasica, was called to testify during the trial. He confirmed that Wilson had admitted every horrifying detail of the murders to him during a phone call. On the night of the crime, Wilson called him 3 times. Stephen said he needed to understand what was happening. Wilson explained everything in detail. Stephen recalled that during the call, Wilson said he had gone to a bar, met a woman, and returned home with her. They spent some time together, went to sleep, and then he got on top of her and strangled her until she died. Wilson stayed in the house throughout the night, then took her body and rolled it into a rug. He attempted to place her in her car, but she was too heavy, so he left the location. Wilson then drove away in the victim's vehicle. A few hours later, he told Stephen that he was driving along the road and noticed a woman walking. He stopped to ask for directions, and she entered the car. While driving, he reached over and strangled her. Wilson believed she was dead and drove into the woods to bury her. However, when he pulled her from the car, he realized she was still alive. He told Stephen that he got back into the car and ran her over multiple times, comparing it to spaghetti. He then exited the vehicle and carried her into the woods. Wilson's father also stated that Wilson had previously been in prison and was a drug addict. There was also a witness, Mila Montanez, Wilson's former girlfriend, who stated that a few days before the incident, she had also been attacked and dragged by him. Fortunately, there were many people present at the time. The trial was filled with shocking testimony and evidence that condemned Wilson's actions toward Diane and Christine. Sarah Miller from the state attorney's office said he is a man who has no respect for women, no respect for life. Wilson showed no reaction as the victims' family members cried on the stand. During Wade Wilson's defense at trial, his legal team requested expert testimony to argue that his mental state had been significantly impacted by past trauma and substance abuse. Dr. Hyman Eisenstein, a forensic neuropsychologist, argued that Wilson's cognitive impairments could have resulted from brain injuries caused by sports-related incidents when he was younger and a car accident when he was an adult. According to Dr. Eisenstein, these injuries impaired Wilson's executive function, which is essential for decision-making and self-control. As a result, Wilson's ability to function as a healthy individual was limited, and his substance abuse worsened the negative effects. In addition, forensic psychiatrist Dr. Mark Mills said Wilson suffered from some form of psychosis based on Eisenstein's interview and testing. Wilson's tests were deemed invalid because he exaggerated his symptoms. Mills said Wilson was experiencing paranoid delusions that could suggest schizophrenia, although he did not display signs of delusions or hallucinations when speaking with experts. In contrast, the prosecution's opposing expert, Dr. Michael Herkhoff, a forensic psychologist, disagreed with the defense's conclusion. Herkhoff argued that there was not enough evidence to support a diagnosis of psychosis. Instead, he attributed Wilson's paranoid behavior and repeated offenses to his well-documented substance abuse, arguing that this was a more believable explanation for his actions. At his trial in early 2024, prosecutors presented forensic evidence and witness testimony. Despite the defense's attempts to counter the evidence, the case against him was overwhelming. He eventually admitted to killing Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz and described the events of the case in detail. He said he felt no remorse, even coldly stating that he would do it again. Wilson appeared smug and smirked as his crimes were presented to the jury. On June 12, 2024, at the first sentencing hearing, Wilson was found guilty on all 6 counts: assault, motor vehicle theft, first-degree petty theft, home invasion, and the first-degree murders of Christine and Diane. After 13 days of deliberation and agreement, the jury found Wilson guilty of both counts of first-degree murder and recommended that he be sentenced to death. Wilson's sentencing was scheduled for August 27, 2024. As scheduled at the final sentencing hearing, Wilson was sentenced to death for the murders of Melton and Ruiz. He appeared to show no emotion in court when he learned that he would be executed as the verdict was read. Wilson's legal team immediately filed an appeal of the death penalty. A few days later, Wilson was transferred from the Lee County Jail in Fort Myers to the Federal Correctional Facility in Rayford to await execution. The Wade Wilson case was a complex legal matter marked by brutal crimes and a lengthy legal process. After being convicted of multiple crimes, including the murders of Melton and Ruiz, Wilson was sentenced to death. His reaction at his sentencing hearing was one of apparent indifference. He showed no emotion when informed of his fate. He is currently in prison awaiting execution. I hope then he will soon pay for the evil he has done to 2 innocent victims. Moving on to the next case. The case of the Ewell family. During the Easter weekend of April 1992, Dana Ewell notified his relatives that he had been unable to contact his parents, Dale and Glee Ewell, and his sister, Tiffany Ewell. Dana remained at the family's California Beach house, where he had spent the weekend with his girlfriend and her father, an FBI agent. When the housekeeper arrived for duty following the Easter weekend, the discovery she made inside the house sent shivers down her spine. The distressed housekeeper ran to a neighbor's home, prompting an immediate call to the police, who arrived at the scene to find the grim discovery of the 3 lifeless bodies. Initially thought to be the result of a botched burglary, it was soon revealed that nothing had been stolen, leading authorities to determine it was a premeditated murder. But who could have had a motive to kill this innocent family? Investigations followed, eliminating several potential suspects until one unlikely individual emerged as the prime suspect. This is the horrifying story of the Ewell family. Dale Ewell was born in Ohio during the Great Depression, which instilled in him a strong work ethic and an appreciation for every dollar he earned. His upbringing in a family that faced economic hardship likely fueled his determination and ambition. After serving in the Air Force, Dale achieved success as a businessman, eventually becoming the president and owner of Western Piper Sales Incorporated, a company specializing in small aircraft sales. He further expanded his financial ventures by investing in several farms using profits from Western Piper. Dale married Glee Michelle, a woman who taught in elementary school, worked as a translator for the CIA, and served on a commission at the State Bar of California. Together, they became parents, welcoming Tiffany in 1967 and Dana in 1971. Dale's success provided the Ewell family with a comfortable residence in Sunnyside, a beachfront property in Peraro Dunes, along with luxury cars and designer clothing. The primary sources of the Ewell family's wealth were the sale of light aircraft and extensive stock market investments. Having built his aviation business successfully, Dale expanded into purchasing multiple farms, ultimately accumulating substantial wealth. Dale and Glee's combined net worth was estimated at $8 million, portraying them as the embodiment of the American dream, despite maintaining a modest lifestyle. While Tiffany followed in her parents' footsteps, Dana diverged significantly from their path. While attending the University of Santa Clara, Dana presented himself as a successful entrepreneur, claiming he was the origin of his family's wealth. His fabricated story attracted attention from a local newspaper and was even included in the Ewell family's school yearbook in 1990. As a student at Santa Clara University, Dana was preoccupied with wealth and stylish living, owning a BMW and having access to funds that allowed him to purchase luxury items, such as jewelry, at will. In contrast, his older sister Tiffany, a graduate of Fresno University, displayed a more grounded personality. From an early age, Dana exhibited a tendency to lie frequently and fabricate stories, despite his remarkable intellect and education. Dana's ambitions went beyond mere comfort, wealth, and a promising future. He shared his father's drive, but lacked the resolve to achieve his goals through legitimate means. Even during his time at Santa Clara University, Dana felt compelled to invent grandiose accounts of his achievements and importance, which were entirely untrue. He demonstrated himself to be a pathological liar, deceiving both faculty and peers into believing he was in charge of a multi-million-dollar enterprise. The underlying tension in the father-son relationship, marked by declining communication, remained mostly hidden from others. Dana's habit of inventing extravagant stories about himself likely caused embarrassment for his father and may have sparked conflicts between them. Despite Dale's modest upbringing and his generous support of his children, Dana appeared to possess an insatiable sense of entitlement. On Sunday, April 19, 1992, in Sunnyside, California, the mild, partly sunny weather created an ideal atmosphere for Easter Sunday. Dale, aged 59, together with his 57-year-old wife, Glee, and their 24-year-old daughter, Tiffany, had spent the Easter weekend at their beach house. Glee and Tiffany returned directly to Sunnyside by car, while Dale chose to fly his private plane to his hangar before driving home. Unbeknownst to them, upon returning home after their 2.5-hour journey, they were ambushed almost immediately upon entering. Tiffany was shot in the head first, fatally, followed shortly by Glee, who was shot multiple times 30 minutes later as Dale arrived in the driveway. Unaware of the tragedy that had struck his family, he too was fatally shot as he opened the door from the garage into the house. The perpetrator had remained in the house, lying in wait for Dale, who had no idea that he had only moments left to live. 2 days later, 21-year-old Dana Ewell, the youngest family member, contacted relatives and friends in Sunnyside, expressing that he could not reach his parents despite living with them. Dana had spent the Easter weekend in San Francisco, about 200 miles away, with his girlfriend, Monica Zent, and her father, John Zent, an FBI agent. On Tuesday, April 21, 1992, the family's longtime housekeeper, Juanita Avenida, arrived for her usual duties. Upon entering the kitchen, she discovered Tiffany's lifeless body lying face down in a pool of blood, her hands tucked beneath her. Distressed, the housekeeper sought help from a neighbor and called the police. Meanwhile, Dana was still in Monterey, California, at the time of the murders. When contacted by authorities, his girlfriend's father quickly arranged for Dana to fly to Fresno. Dana appeared visibly distressed throughout the ordeal. Subsequently, the police initiated a thorough investigation, spending numerous days collecting evidence and interviewing witnesses. The crime scene had been carefully staged to mimic a failed robbery, but experienced detectives identified it as a premeditated attack disguised to make it appear as though the family had unexpectedly encountered an intruder and was murdered. Upon closer examination, detectives noted several irregularities: the absence of weapons, bloodstains, footprints, or DNA evidence. Instead, they observed a meticulously planned and executed assault. The precision of the assailant's shots was remarkable, with only one miss, and the perpetrator had even collected the spent bullet casings. Inside the home, investigators found a box of 9mm ammunition purchased by Dale, later determined to have been used in the killings. Although the house appeared ransacked, no valuables were actually stolen. There were no signs of forced entry through doors or windows, and the alarm, which typically activated, had been deactivated. The scene seemed deliberately staged to suggest a burglary in progress. Investigators meticulously examined the backgrounds of the victims, searching for any leads that might connect to their murders. Dale's past activities, including selling airplanes for an individual later convicted of drug smuggling in the 1970s, and a problematic real estate deal with his brother that threatened to cost investors millions, were carefully scrutinized. However, both incidents were ultimately dismissed as having no relation to the homicides. The police thoroughly investigated all other potential suspects with plausible motives, eventually focusing on Dana. Dana stood to gain significantly from the tragedy, being the sole surviving member of the Ewell family and the primary heir to the estate. Despite Dana's seemingly solid alibi, being with his girlfriend and her FBI agent father at the time of the murders, the police remained suspicious of him. Dana's behavior did little to ease their concerns and only reinforced their instincts about his involvement. Although he outwardly expressed grief over the murders, including offering a $50,000 reward for information leading to the capture of the killer, Dana's sorrow appeared insincere. His emotional response to the brutal killings of his own family seemed lacking, failing to reflect the expected horror and anguish. Instead, his focus appeared to center on matters related to his parents' wills and inheritance, rather than mourning the tragic loss of his loved ones. In a particularly insensitive act, he invited a friend to tour the house while bloodstains and spatters remained visible, demonstrating a lack of empathy. Allegedly, he even expressed disdain for the police investigation, claiming they were incompetent and would never solve the case. This provoked a prolonged and intense cat-and-mouse game between Dana and authorities, spanning 3 arduous years as investigators pursued every possible lead, further escalating the conflict. Dale's brothers contacted authorities, accusing their nephew of wrongdoing. They alleged that during the reading of the wills, Dana had reacted angrily upon learning that the trust restricted his access to the $8 million estate until he turned 30. According to their account, Dana had even slammed his fist on the desk and exclaimed, "How could he have done this to me?" referring to his late father. The arrangement stipulated that his parents would cover his expenses until he turned 25, followed by him receiving investment dividends until reaching 30. Half of the estate would become available at age 30, with the remaining half accessible at 35. Before the funerals for Dale, Glee, and Tiffany, the brothers took steps to prevent Dana from claiming what he believed was rightfully his. Nevertheless, Dana managed to secure approximately $300,000 from an insurance policy that was either exempt from the trust provisions or had been mistakenly overlooked. Dana's uncles, his father's 3 brothers, actively blocked him from inheriting any portion of Dale's assets and wealth, causing significant frustration for Dana. Despite the mounting pressure from investigators closing in on him and accusations from extended family members suggesting he committed the murders to gain control of the estate, Dana continued to live seemingly unbothered. He continued to spend recklessly, lavishly buying gifts for his girlfriend, Monica, and even contributing to her educational expenses. However, the source of his seemingly endless funds remained a mystery. Suspecting that financial motives played a major role in the murders, investigators intensified their scrutiny. They uncovered evidence indicating that Dana had been embezzling funds from multiple sources, including his grandmother's $40,000 trust account. By the time detectives intervened, The elderly woman had been left with only $2,000 to cover her ongoing care at a nursing facility. The revelation that Dana had exploited his vulnerable grandmother for financial gain only reinforced the police's suspicions regarding his character. Despite this damning discovery, authorities still required conclusive evidence linking Dana to the murders before they could make an arrest. One of Dana's college acquaintances, Joel Rovick, was often captivated by Dana's elaborate tales and his portrayal of a pampered, affluent lifestyle. Joel found Dana fascinating, particularly his wealth, apparent success, and ability to effortlessly attract attractive women. People around them were puzzled by what they had in common, as they were as different as night and day. While Dana pursued higher social status, Joel was more interested in video games, firearms, and explosives. Despite their differences, Joel's friendship with Dana gave him access to exclusive parties and introductions to desirable women. Shortly after the murders, Joel had dropped out of school, and within weeks of the Yule family's tragic deaths, he visited their home for a tour. Eventually, he became Dana's roommate in the same residence. Joel's association with Dana marked a crucial turning point in the investigation. Both Dana and Joel began making unusual cash purchases, such as helicopter piloting lessons, despite Joel lacking an apparent source of income. Consequently, both came under surveillance, and investigators monitored their communications, which were conducted via sophisticated pagers and payphones. Authorities cloned Dana's pager and wiretapped his landline in May 1993. Joel was overheard by an officer while speaking on a payphone, recorded saying, "They don't have evidence. They will try to catch you in a lie." On another occasion, he was heard advising, "Just play the game." Dana continued playing the game, buying his girlfriend a new car and covering her law school tuition after exhausting the insurance payout. As previously noted, he took $4,000 from his grandmother's account, leaving her only $22,000 for nursing home expenses. In 1994, investigators shifted focus to forensic analysis, which revealed that the murder weapon was a specialized 9mm assault rifle manufactured in Colorado. Company records indicated that such a rifle had been purchased by an individual named Jack Pond. Shortly before April 1992, Jack had been a high school friend of Joel. When questioned, Jack initially denied purchasing the gun, but later claimed he had bought it as a birthday gift for himself, unknown to Joel, and alleged that the weapon had been stolen. The evidence against Dana and Joel was mounting. At one point, detectives attempted to unsettle Dana during a visit to his university dorm, telling him they believed Joel had murdered his family. Dana remained silent, his face visibly pale after the detectives left. Unaware they were being observed, Dana and his girlfriend Monica, who was present during the visit, hastily made a phone call to Rovick. On March 2, 1995, the police took action and arrested Dana and Joel. Joining them were Peter Rovick, Joel's brother, and Jack Pond. Peter had struck a deal with authorities, offering testimony against his brother and Dana in exchange for immunity. He admitted to the police that he had crafted a homemade silencer and attached it to the murder weapon. He disposed of the gun barrel, Joel's tennis shoes worn during the killings, and a collection of gun enthusiast magazines. Peter acknowledged carrying out these actions in collaboration with Jack Pond. Upon his arrest, Jack provided a differing account regarding the firearm. He admitted to purchasing it for Joel, but claimed he was unaware of its intended use in the murders. Additionally, he confirmed Peter's version of their joint disposal of evidence. Jack, like Peter, received immunity in exchange for his trial testimony. As a result of Peter and Jack's statements, the barrel of the murder weapon was discovered buried in a dirt field. Dana and Joel, however, were not offered any plea agreements. Instead, they were charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances, making them eligible for the death penalty. The trial did not begin until late 1997. Dana and Joel, who had once been close enough to travel to Mexico together, share flying lessons, and even live in the same house where Dale, Glee, and Tiffany were killed, now had separate legal representation and adopted differing stances during the trial. Prosecutors argued that Dana's motive was greed, alleging that he had promised Joel a portion of the inheritance. Dana's attorney argued for his innocence, claiming that Joel and Jack had orchestrated and carried out the murders. Meanwhile, Joel's attorney, recognizing the weight of evidence against his client, aimed to save him from the death penalty. During his testimony, Jack Pond revealed that he not only purchased the murder weapon for Joel and assisted in its disposal, but also that Joel had provided him with details of the events on that fateful day in April 1992, which he was prepared to share. Dana had approached Joel, requesting a favor that was difficult for him to refuse. Acting as the executor of Dana's plan, Joel entered the Ewell residence with precise instructions, having meticulously prepared by shaving his entire body. Joel waited patiently for 12 hours, seated on a plastic sheet to avoid leaving any trace of DNA, even a single eyelash. He was also instructed to ensure that no bullet casings were left at the scene. Tiffany was the first victim, passing by Joel without noticing him before he fatally shot her in the back of the head. Glee, however, glimpsed the assailant and was struck by a bullet despite attempting to flee to the office. Bleeding heavily, she was pursued and mercilessly shot multiple times by Joel, who then straddled her in a chilling moment just before delivering the fatal shot. Glee locked eyes with Joel, recognizing him as a friend Dana had introduced to the family a month earlier. After fatally shooting Glee, Joel changed the magazines in the gun and put on fresh gloves, waiting for Dale's arrival. He subsequently murdered Dale as well. However, during Jack's testimony recounting Dale's murder from Joel's perspective, he made a critical error by saying, "And I saw the eye," which undermined the credibility of his account. The jury viewed his testimony with skepticism, suspecting greater involvement than he admitted. Nonetheless, his immunity agreement shielded him from facing charges for the deaths. On May 27, 1998, 8 months after the trial began, the jury unanimously found Dana Ewell and Joel Rovick guilty on all counts. However, they were unable to reach a verdict on sentencing. While 2 votes spared Joel from the death penalty, Dana narrowly avoided the same fate by only 1 vote. They both received 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Dana was incarcerated at Corcoran State Prison, located 50 miles south of Fresno. There, he found himself among other inmates, including notorious figures such as Charles Manson. Sadly, his grandmother, from whom he had previously stolen, passed away in 1999. In the years following his conviction, Dana claimed to have experienced a spiritual transformation, embracing Christianity. He is listed on an online prison pen pal platform, where his profile states that he graduated in finance from Santa Clara University and had begun a career in investment banking before some extraordinarily painful events turned his world upside down. Meanwhile, Joel Rovick was imprisoned at Mule Creek State Prison in Ione, approximately 2 hours south of San Francisco. This facility has housed other infamous inmates, including Tex Watson and Robert John Bardo. Jack Pond attended law school and ultimately became an attorney. Monica Zent ended her relationship with Dana, completed her law studies, and established a successful law practice. While Monica was scrutinized during the investigation, no evidence implicated her in the murders, aside from her apparent reluctance to participate in the case, which resulted in her boyfriend's conviction and the fact that he had used some of the ill-gotten funds to contribute to her law school expenses. Greed, entitlement, and heartlessness defined Dana Ewell. His insatiable desire for wealth and his willingness to manipulate and betray his closest family ultimately led to the brutal destruction of his own relatives. It is profoundly sorrowful and regrettable what occurred to the victims of this tragic story at the hands of their avaricious and deceitful brother and son, along with those who assisted him. As we reflect upon this heart-rending tale, our sympathies lie with the victims whose lives were senselessly cut short and the loved ones they left behind. Moving on to the next case. The case of Grant Hendrickson and Michelle Cartagena. Grant Hendrickson, born on September 20th, 1972, in Macon, Georgia, was an outdoor enthusiast who enjoyed fishing, golf, canoeing, and camping. Like his girlfriend, he was also an active volunteer in the community, having worked at the Museum of Arts and Sciences in Macon since the age of 15. Their shared active lifestyles likely brought them together, according to those who knew them. Grant's girlfriend, Michelle Cartagena, was born on May 2, 1975, in Monterey, California. She was a well-rounded and talented individual, participating in her school's marching orchestra band, excelling as the top singles tennis player, and leading the school's softball team. Additionally, she was a member of the National Honor Society. Outside of school, Michelle volunteered with the Red Cross and an animal welfare association and frequently visited elderly people. Her father remembered her as a caring and driven individual who aspired to pursue a career in medicine to help others and give back to society. On January 3, 1995, a grim discovery shook the typically quiet area of Juliet Lake. A passerby reported finding two lifeless bodies near the lake. The local sheriff and his deputy responded and were confronted with a shocking scene. Their office was not accustomed to handling serious crimes, as fights and thefts were more common. The deputies were unprepared for what they found. A white Honda parked on the lake shore with a man's body inside and a woman's body lying on the ground nearby. Even to a non-expert, the cause of death was evident. Both victims had been shot. The car contained the male victim's personal belongings, including identification, which revealed the identities of the victims. The male victim was 22-year-old Grant Hendrickson, found in the driver's seat. The second victim was 19-year-old Michelle Cartagena. Police were alerted, and officers from the Major Crimes Unit, along with forensic experts, arrived at the scene. Detectives' attention was immediately drawn to Michelle's body, which was partially exposed with her skirt pulled up, suggesting a possible motive for the crime. Examination of the car revealed bullet holes, leading detectives to believe that the perpetrator had opened fire while they were inside. Grant had been hit by 3 bullets and had no chance of survival. Michelle had been shot twice and likely remained conscious as the perpetrator pulled her from the car. The position of her body, with her legs spread apart, suggested that the perpetrator may have intended to exploit her vulnerability but did not follow through. Forensic experts found a substance on the inside of her thighs, later identified as saliva containing chewing tobacco particles. The saliva samples were sent to the lab for further analysis. During the crime scene investigation, police discovered important evidence, including bullet casings of 2 different calibers, 13.223 caliber casings and 4.9mm casings. The presence of 2 types of ammunition suggested the possibility of 2 perpetrators, each using a different weapon. The families of Grant and Michelle were shocked and stunned upon learning of the tragedy. They struggled to comprehend who could commit such a heinous act against their children. As only children, Grant and Michelle were extremely close to their parents. They had been dating for over a year and had already made plans for their future together, including an upcoming wedding. When detectives could not identify any enemies or suspects through family and friends, they began further investigations. They visited Mercer University in Macon, where Grant and Michelle were classmates, to gather more information and piece together the events surrounding the tragedy. The police investigation into the deaths of Michelle and Grant continued, but no significant leads had emerged. Both victims were well-liked and respected at the university, with no known conflicts or enemies. Initially, detectives considered the possibility that the killer might have been a man with romantic feelings for Michelle who had been rejected, but this theory was unsubstantiated and was eventually set aside. A visit to Mercer University did not yield any useful information for the authorities. However, by reconstructing the events of January 2nd, detectives determined that Michelle and Grant had first gone to a restaurant and then watched a movie. After the film, they went to a holiday camp at Juliet Lake. The camp was open to the public 24/7 and featured a boat launch, parking area, small dock, and picnic tables. Since it was a free public space, no staff or security were present on the night of the crime. Other people were in the area but did not report anything suspicious. Some individuals heard loud noises, which they initially dismissed as firecrackers. A witness reported seeing a 1980s Honda CRX speeding out of the parking lot. Meanwhile, investigators discovered a DNA sample in saliva on Michelle's thigh. However, DNA technology was still in its early stages at the time. The DNA Identification Act, which allowed the FBI to establish a national DNA database, was not passed until 1994. As a result, there was no database to compare the DNA sample against, and it could only be matched by directly comparing it to the perpetrator's DNA. The investigation also included questioning staff at the restaurant and cinema that Michelle and Grant had visited before their deaths, but nothing suspicious was uncovered. Authorities considered the possibility that the couple might have been random victims or had a chance encounter with someone who became violent. Detectives found no evidence of any other motives, as the victims had good grades, no connections to questionable individuals, and did not use illicit substances. The fact that the perpetrator left behind valuables, including money, indicated that the motive was not financial gain but something else. Forensic analysis suggested that the likely weapons used in the crime were an AR-15 rifle and a 9mm Ruger pistol. Despite questioning over 100 individuals and collecting DNA samples from several dozen potential suspects, the investigation stalled. More than a year and a half after the murders, Agent Randy Upton of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation took over the case in the fall of 1996. Randy adopted a new approach, shifting his focus from identifying the perpetrator to locating the weapon used in the crime. He visited the largest gun store in Macon and requested a list of customers who had purchased an AR-15 rifle between 1985 and 1995. Investigator Randy began contacting individuals on the list of 108 potential suspects. He explained that cooperating by allowing their weapon to be inspected and providing a DNA sample would greatly aid the investigation. Most of the people he spoke with agreed, allowing experts to conduct further tests. As a result, the list of suspects began to shrink. On November 27, 1996, Randy contacted Andrew Allen Cook, a 22-year-old on the list. During their conversation, Randy explained the purpose of the call and asked permission to examine his rifle. Andrew claimed he no longer owned the rifle, stating that he had sold it in April 1994, nearly a year before the deaths of Grant and Michelle. Nonetheless, gun store records proved that Andrew's claim was false, showing that he had actually purchased the rifle in August 1994. Agent Randy grew suspicious of Andrew's evasive behavior. When Randy requested a DNA sample, Andrew claimed he needed to speak with his father, an FBI agent, before complying, and then abruptly hung up. This conduct heightened Randy's suspicion that Andrew could be the person they were seeking. Investigators uncovered that 5 months after the murders of Grant and Michelle, in 1995, Andrew had pawned his rifle at a local gun store. Additionally, in December 1993, a Ruger pistol had been purchased on Andrew's behalf because he was underage, and he later sold this pistol to a friend in July 1995, shortly after pawning the rifle. The sequence of events suggested that Andrew's disposal of both firearms within 6 months of the murders was unlikely to be coincidental. Further investigation revealed that he had also sold his 1987 Honda CRX, a vehicle matching the description of one seen near the crime scene. Agent Randy then visited the diaper factory where Andrew worked. Although Andrew was not present, a co-worker reported that Andrew had previously claimed he had shot someone with a rifle just to see if he could get away with it. The colleague noted that Andrew frequently used chewing tobacco. Another friend testified that in late November 1996, Andrew had said he needed to leave town because things were getting hot. These coincidences convinced Agent Randy to intensify his search for Andrew, who had not lived with his parents for several years. On December 4, 1996, Agent Randy met with Andrew's father, John, an FBI agent with 29 years of experience. Randy explained the investigation into the Juliet Lake crime and that he wanted to speak with Andrew, whom he could not locate. John, though familiar with the case from the news, had not been involved and initially did not consider Andrew a suspect, but promised to contact his son. Later that day, John reached Andrew by phone. The conversation took a shocking turn when Andrew said, "Daddy, I'm not telling you. You're one of them. You're a cop." John pressed further, asking, "Were you the one who did the shooting?" After a brief pause, Andrew confirmed his father's worst fears, saying yes. He explained that on the night of the incident, he had been fishing at Juliet Lake when a couple arrived. An argument ensued with Grant, who allegedly threatened him with a pistol, prompting Andrew to grab his rifle and commit the fatal act. John urged Andrew to turn himself in, but Andrew refused, insisting he would rather disappear. Despite the emotional turmoil, John maintained his professional composure and reported his son's confession the following day to the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. Unbeknownst to Agent Randy, Andrew had been arrested earlier that morning in a nearby county for illegally hunting deer under a false name. His true identity was quickly discovered. When Randy traveled to the Jones County Sheriff's Office to speak with Andrew, he introduced himself and asked if Andrew would answer questions. Andrew's response was defiant. "It's been 2 years and you still don't have any evidence. I used to own a Honda, a rifle, and a Ruger, but now you're just trying to frame me." Andrew told the sheriff that he would reveal the full truth if they helped his father secure a lawyer. After being transferred to Monroe County, John Cook, Andrew's father, was permitted a private conversation with him. When John hugged his son, both broke down in tears. During this meeting, Andrew confessed that he had not been at the lake to fish on the night of the crime. Instead, He claimed he arrived after Grant and Michelle were already there. According to Andrew, he fired multiple shots from his rifle, then used his pistol to shoot additional rounds. He also admitted to pulling Michelle's body from the car in an attempt to mislead investigators. As an extra precaution, he spat on her body to prevent the police from linking him through saliva analysis. Andrew was subsequently charged with the murders of Grant Hendrickson and Michelle Cartagena. The police collected additional evidence to corroborate his confession, including tracing the rifle and pistol used in the crime. Forensic testing confirmed that these firearms were indeed the murder weapons, and Andrew's DNA matched the saliva found on Michelle's body, further implicating him. The trial took place in 1998, during which John Cook publicly apologized to the victims' families. He acknowledged that his apologies could not heal their pain and expressed regret for failing to recognize the evil within his son. On March 19, 1998, Andrew Cook was found guilty and sentenced to death. He exhausted all appeals, and his execution was scheduled for February 22, 2013. 3 days prior, his attorneys filed a clemency appeal, citing mental instability and the need for treatment. The State Board of Pardons and Paroles reviewed the request, but ultimately denied it. On the day of the execution, Andrew's family visited him in prison to bid farewell. He was allowed to select a final meal, which included steak, baked potatoes, fried shrimp, lemon pie, and soda. As he lay strapped to the gurney in the death chamber, Andrew delivered his final words, expressing remorse. "I'm sorry," he said. "I won't ask you to forgive me, as I struggle to forgive myself." He thanked his family for their unwavering support and apologized for the pain he had caused them, stating, "I'm sorry I took so much from you all." At 11:08 p.m., the lethal injection was administered, and 14 minutes later, Andrew Cook, aged 38, was pronounced dead. Following the execution, Mary Hendrickson, mother of one of the victims, expressed relief that justice had finally been served after 18 long years. Moving on to the next case. The case of Jamie Bowie. On the evening of Monday, April 16, 1990, Brian Bowie was waiting for his 20-year-old younger sister, Jamie, to come home. Earlier that weekend, she had traveled to Phoenix to visit family and friends, and she was expected to return to Los Angeles by the start of the work week. Jamie was especially eager to get back because she had her first day of work at a major Hollywood studio the next day, where she would be involved in an important new project. Brian was in their apartment, looking forward to celebrating Jamie's upcoming successes. However, as time passed, she still hadn't arrived. He assumed she was simply delayed on her journey and decided to go to bed since he needed to wake up early. In the middle of the night, he heard the sound of the door, but assumed it was Jamie returning. Feeling exhausted, Brian didn't get up. Instead, he turned over and went back to sleep. Brian awoke in the morning to find the sun already up. He immediately went to check on his sister, Jamie, but she was missing. Brian looked around the apartment and noticed that some items were out of place, but this did not give him any clues about what had happened during the night or where Jamie might be now. Since mobile phones did not exist at the time, he had no way of finding out what had occurred. Brian remembered hearing the sound of the door opening in the middle of the night and thought Jamie had come home, changed her clothes, and left early in the morning before he woke up. However, they had agreed that she would wake him if she came home late at night, or at least in the morning when she got up. For some unknown reason, she had not done so. Brian felt confused and wondered if she might have left for something urgent. Perhaps she was dealing with car trouble or something related to her new job. Brian needed to get ready for the day, so he focused on his own tasks. He left a note for Jamie and headed out. When he returned home that evening, he was terrified to find the note still there and his sister still missing. This was alarming because Jamie was about to start her dream job and had prepared for it. She was normally responsible and would never miss important events without a valid reason or informing someone. What made things worse was the evidence that someone had been in their apartment while Brian was gone. The rooms were messy, and items like the stereo system, a suitcase, and some valuables were missing. Brian knew Jamie would never throw things around or remove valuables like that. It was obvious someone else had entered their home. Afraid to stay alone, Brian rushed to a nearby friend's house to call for help. When the police arrived, Brian explained what had happened over the past few days, suspecting that Jamie's disappearance was connected to a burglary. However, the officers dismissed his concerns, seeing it as an ordinary break-in. They pointed out the lack of signs of kidnapping or a struggle. No blood or weapons were present. In their opinion, Jamie simply wasn't in the apartment, and they thought any fears Brian had were unjustified. The police created a report about the theft and examined the house. They wanted to make sure Jamie was not involved in the incident. They contacted her family in Phoenix. Her relatives confirmed that Jamie had left them on time, and they had not seen her since. The police speculated that she might have encountered problems during her journey, which was roughly 600 kilometers long. They assumed her car might have broken down, and she would return once she resolved any issues. After this, the police left the home. However, Brian sensed that something was wrong. He chose to stay with a friend for some time because he did not feel safe in the apartment. Brian informed their parents about everything that had occurred, and they agreed with him that there were suspicious elements in the case. They feared that something bad might have happened to Jamie. Consequently, their mother contacted the local police in Arizona and filed a missing persons report for Jamie. The police officers promptly began their investigation. News about Jamie's disappearance was broadcast on the radio throughout the state, prompting the initiation of a nationwide search. Jamie's mother provided photographs and a description of the clothes her daughter was wearing when she went missing: bright pink pants and a light-colored top. Meanwhile, Jamie's father, Joe, and Brian printed and distributed flyers with her photograph in both cities. They also created flyers featuring her car, a blue 1978 Volkswagen Beetle convertible. They handed out flyers along the route Jamie was likely to take when returning home. The efforts of her family were extensive, covering hundreds of kilometers along the highway in search of Jamie and her vehicle. The journey from Phoenix to Los Angeles took at least 6 to 7 hours, and they would have traveled west along Highway 10 to cover that distance. The Jamie family decided to split up to drive along the route each day. During their journey, they visited various motels, cafes, and gas stations, speaking to hundreds of people in hopes of finding any clues about Jamie. A large search operation organized by Jamie's relatives attracted significant attention from the local community, leading to rumors that she had been kidnapped and that the police were not thoroughly investigating the case. This prompted the police to examine the case more carefully. Detectives eventually suspected a connection between the robbery at Brian's apartment and Jamie's disappearance, as both events occurred around the same time. Meanwhile, Jamie's family continued their efforts to locate her. Jamie's mother frequently posted updates and assumed the role of an investigator, questioning staff at roadside businesses. Her determination impressed even the police, as it was uncommon for a mother to be so actively engaged in a large-scale search for her child. While many parents might struggle to cope in such circumstances, she remained focused and resolute, desperately searching for her daughter. However, it is difficult to imagine the emotional anguish she endured during this search. Meanwhile, Jamie's brother and father were also involved, doing their best to collect any information about her whereabouts. The situation grew increasingly complex, particularly in some wilderness areas that were devoid of people and infrastructure, posing a danger to Jamie's life. Had search teams found her in those areas, it would have been extremely unfortunate. Time passed without any leads, and it seemed unlikely that Jamie would be located in the desert. Nevertheless, her family's efforts ultimately yielded results. Shortly after the police initiated the rescue operation, several motorists who had heard about the missing girl contacted the authorities. They reported seeing a young woman resembling Jamie in a blue convertible Volkswagen Beetle parked by the side of the road, seemingly experiencing car trouble. Witnesses described a couple of dark-skinned individuals assisting the girl with her car. They were standing beside her. However, the witnesses did not intervene and did not observe anything suspicious. It is important to note that Jamie was a strikingly attractive individual, and her distinctive car made her easily noticeable. This drew the attention of witnesses, allowing them to provide crucial information quickly. After receiving these reports, detectives proceeded to the location where the witnesses had seen Jamie. There, they encountered witnesses who recognized her from the photograph Jamie and confirmed what they had observed. The witnesses were able to provide the investigators with detailed information regarding what they had seen. They explained that while resting in a truck parking lot, they noticed a girl standing by the roadside. She had exited her car and opened the hood because the engine was smoking. Shortly afterward, a couple arrived in a red car. The man was driving, and his wife was seated in the passenger seat. After restarting her car, the girl drove away, and the couple followed closely behind her until they disappeared from view. This incident occurred in the middle of a deserted highway. Initially, the witnesses considered the situation unremarkable. However, upon learning about the young woman Jamie's disappearance, they began to harbor doubts. They started to suspect that the couple who had assisted the girl might actually be connected to her abduction. Meanwhile, the police intensified their search for Jamie, focusing on the segment of the highway where witnesses had seen the events unfold. They concentrated on the central desert area, where there was a higher likelihood of locating someone in distress. Despite searching hundreds of kilometers of road, they found no trace of Jamie's blue convertible. It appeared to have vanished entirely. The situation was further complicated because it occurred at a time without the internet. People did not possess mobile phones, making communication difficult. There were no geotags, GPS tracking, or surveillance cameras available. The police seized their only opportunity by placing a large poster along the highway featuring a picture of Jamie and her car. They requested that anyone with helpful information come forward to aid in the search for her. While many individuals quickly contacted the department, unfortunately, most of the calls were from people seeking attention without providing any valuable information. In total, they received approximately 200 calls, but none yielded the anticipated results. Consequently, a considerable amount of time was wasted handling these unhelpful calls. About a month after Jamie was reported missing, a witness working in an orchard contacted the police. He discovered a body in the irrigation system. The police promptly arrived at the scene and found the body of a girl in very poor condition. Her clothing closely matched the description given by Jamie's relatives, including bright pink pants and a light-colored top. However, investigators did not immediately identify her. Before awaiting the forensic examination results, the police estimated that the body had been there for about a month. During the investigation, they also discovered a spent shotgun shell at the scene, making it impossible to determine the cause of death without an autopsy. The presence of the shell indicated that the girl had been shot, suggesting that the orchard was the crime scene. The forensic expert revealed during the autopsy that the victim had been shot twice. It was determined that the first shot occurred while the girl was standing on the ground. A gun had been aimed at her, prompting her to instinctively raise her hand in defense. She likely attempted to escape, but the attacker was faster. The shot struck her arm and hit her face and head, resulting in a fatal injury. Subsequently, she fell into an irrigation channel and was shot in the back. The victim was identified as Jamie Bowie, who had been reported missing. Her body was found in an orchard near Indio, California. Investigators understood why Jamie had remained missing for such an extended period. The area was extremely remote and sparsely populated. The only way to notice anything in the irrigation ditch was to come across it directly, as it was invisible from a distance. Additionally, very few people were present in the area, mostly just wild animals. Everyone was shocked by the events. Jamie was friendly, beautiful, and full of ambition. Her family and friends adored her, particularly her brother, with whom she shared a close bond. Jamie had her entire life ahead of her, so who could be so cruel as to take it? Jamie's brother, Brian, informed investigators that she had always aspired to work in Hollywood, and just days before her untimely death, she had secured a position there. Jamie had recently become a PR manager at a major studio. While the family was grieving, detectives concentrated on a key piece of evidence: a blue Volkswagen Beetle convertible that had last been seen with Jamie. No one had seen the car since Jamie was assisted in repairing it by two unidentified black individuals. The police focused on locating this suspicious couple, believing they might be connected to her death. Despite months of fruitless searching, about a year and a half after Jamie's brutal murder, the case took a new turn. The police station received information regarding a blue convertible. They confirmed it was indeed the convertible linked to the investigation, as the license plates matched those on the wanted list. However, one strange detail emerged. The car had been repainted black and appeared abandoned. The police thoroughly examined the vehicle, but found no clues inside. To identify the driver, they held a press conference to seek assistance from witnesses through the media. While this method did not always produce results, they hoped that this time someone would respond. Eventually, a witness called in, claiming to have seen his neighbor driving the car. This revelation surprised the investigators. They interviewed the witness in detail, and he provided valuable information about the neighbor. The police then summoned the neighbor for questioning, which further complicated matters. He revealed that he had stolen the car several months earlier. In exchange for providing information crucial to the investigation, the detectives assured him he would not face charges for theft. The man agreed and explained that after stealing the car, he discovered it had electrical problems. He then took it to a repair shop. When the mechanic inquired whether the car was stolen, he mentioned seeing a similar car belonging to someone else with comparable electrical issues. Fearing exposure, the thief decided to abandon the convertible. He repainted it black and moved it away from his residence. He provided the police with the address of the repair shop, where they learned who had previously contacted the mechanic about a problematic car. The detectives traced the owner of the shop where the convertible had been taken. During their meeting, the owner revealed that he had purchased the convertible from a black couple who had arrived in a red Volkswagen. This couple had previously helped a girl with car repairs and then sold her vehicle, suggesting they were aware of Jamie's situation. The investigators intensified their questioning of the shop owner to gather additional information about the couple. He provided a crucial lead. He possessed a sales contract for the vehicle dated just one day after Jamie was reported missing. The document included the seller's signature, and suddenly, the case that had remained cold for over a year began to progress rapidly. The sales contract listed a man named Billy Ray Rakes. At the time of the sale, he was 45 years old and lived in the Los Angeles area with his 28-year-old wife, Hilda. Detectives looked into Billy's background and discovered he had a violent criminal history. He was notorious for having killed his own brother during a fight. His criminal activities began in the 1970s when he vandalized a police office in Compton. He had a history of stealing Quanzuk cars, which no longer seemed coincidental. Billy was a dangerous individual capable of brutal acts, and Jamie's chance meet with him led to her tragic fate. When detectives arrived at the couple's home, they were not there. They had already fled. The police sought assistance from the media and labeled the couple, believed to be African American, as fugitives. Once this information was made public, it became apparent that the couple had more enemies than allies. The police station received a flood of calls with tips about their whereabouts and activities. It was revealed that Billy had a plane ticket to the Turks in Caicos Islands, a former British colony in the Caribbean. He was still in the city due to difficulties obtaining a passport. Authorities discovered the suspect's hiding place and, based on the tips, set up an ambush in a parking lot, capturing them as they approached their home. After the arrest, the police decision was made to separate Hilda and Billy to compare their statements and extract a confession. Hilda and Billy were taken to a citrus garden in Indio in different cars. During this time, Hilda was extremely anxious, nearing a nervous breakdown. She was also not given any information by the police, which heightened her fear. This worked in favor of the investigation, as a person in such a distressed state is more likely to divulge information, which is exactly what happened during the interrogation. In the interrogation room, Hilda recounted the story about Jamie's disappearance, but now included more gruesome details. She claimed that they encountered Jamie on Highway 10. Jamie's car had broken down and was experiencing engine troubles. Billy offered assistance, managed to start the car, but warned Jamie that she needed to get to a service station urgently. They suggested Jamie follow them to the nearest place where her car could be repaired or to the city where she would be safe. Jamie agreed and placed her trust in the strangers, Hilda and Billy. After reaching the nearest settlement, invited the couple Hilda and Billy to dinner at a restaurant. She felt very thankful and even promised that after she received her first wages from her new job, she would pay Billy for his help. Jamie seemed to trust the couple completely, which they took advantage of. First, Billy told Hilda that he planned to steal a car from Jamie, as he usually did. Hilda agreed because she knew it was safer not to oppose him. However, things escalated. He intended to use a shotgun. Hilda had no idea that her husband was planning to kill Jamie. She later confessed that she only realized the plot involved Jamie's death while they were at the restaurant, where Jamie was treating them. When Jamie stood up to go to the restroom, Billy disclosed his intentions and discussed with Hilda how they would harm Jamie. Afterward, Jamie drove away in her car, with Hilda and Billy following her. Eventually, they stopped Jamie's car and kidnapped her. They attempted to use her bank card at an ATM 100 kilometers from Los Angeles and later went to a bank in Indio, but found no funds in her account. Hilda initially wanted to persuade Billy to abandon the plan, but she eventually gave up, becoming fearful for her own safety. In their relationship, Hilda was clearly submissive. Her husband, Billy, dominated her, and he likely would not hesitate to employ physical force to maintain control. According to Hilda, Billy ordered Jamie to follow him into the dangerous desert, and Jamie complied. Moments later, Hilda heard 2 gunshots. Only Billy returned to the car. Hilda was uncertain about what he had done to Jamie, but she was certain that Jamie was no longer alive. Despite her fear, she remained silent and did not question Billy. However, Billy's plans did not end there. He intended to rob Jamie's apartment. He retained her keys and took her driver's license, which enabled him to discover her address. While Jamie's brother, Brian, was asleep in the apartment, Billy broke in. He was unaware of Brian's presence, focusing solely on stealing valuables. After taking what he wanted, Billy left the apartment. Had Jamie's brother awakened during the robbery, he might have suffered the same fate as Jamie. Fortunately, he remained asleep throughout the ordeal. Nevertheless, Billy did not stop there. He returned to the apartment during the day to retrieve additional valuables. When the police searched the apartment he shared with Hilda, they discovered some of these stolen items. Additional stolen goods were located at a pawn shop in Denver, where Billy admitted they had sold them for $2,000. They were seeking quick cash, which explained why they sold the car for such a low price. During his interrogation, Billy attempted to shift the blame to his wife, Hilda, for the crime, but his account contradicted all the evidence that had already been collected. The police were clear about who was responsible for the brutal murder. Moreover, Billy's criminal history made his culpability even more apparent. Ultimately, the prosecutor's office offered Hilda a plea bargain requiring her to provide incriminating testimony against her husband, Billy. Under state law, the penalty for his crime was death, so Hilda agreed to cooperate with the prosecution. She admitted guilt in the murder, even though she did not actually pull the trigger. Despite having the opportunity, she did not warn Jamie of the imminent danger. Consequently, Hilda received a life sentence but was eligible for parole after 25 years. During the trial, which commenced in 1994, Hilda testified against Billy. The prosecution faced a significant challenge due to the lack of physical evidence. At that time, DNA testing was not widely available, and no other technologies could provide critical evidence. Billy also sought a deal with the prosecution but was denied. Subsequently, he attempted to claim insanity to evade responsibility for his violent actions, but this strategy failed. Billy Ray Riggs never admitted involvement in Jamie Bowie's death. The jury carefully reviewed the case materials before finding him guilty of premeditated murder. He faced the death penalty, which he feared greatly. The jury unanimously supported this verdict due to Billy's cruel treatment of Jamie, as he had robbed her of her future. The decision was vital for Jamie's family, who were trying to come to terms with her tragic death. They believed Jamie fell victim to her own naivety, having trusted strangers too much, which ultimately cost her life. Hilda Riggs was released from prison in November 2014. Her husband, Billy Ray Riggs, has submitted several appeals, all of which have been denied. He is currently on death row, awaiting execution. Moving on to the next case. The case of Jared Bregan. Jared J. Bregan was born in 1989 in Florida into a modest family, where he was the second of 2 sons. He grew up alongside his older brother, Adam. The two were practically inseparable from childhood. Their parents were devout members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. As a teenager, Jared met a girl named Mallory Bowden at church. The two developed a romantic relationship, and Bowden would later describe Jared as her first true love. However, their relationship never resulted in marriage, as cohabitation was discouraged within their religious community. Divorces can sometimes take dark turns with tragic outcomes. Jared Bregan's story is an example in which former partners became bitter enemies, leading to catastrophic consequences for both families involved and leaving their children affected. When Jared graduated from a Florida arts high school in 2007 and decided to continue his education in another state, the couple went their separate ways. Jared moved to Utah, where he enrolled in college and later met his future first wife. At the age of 20, Jared encountered a woman named Shawnanna Gardner at a friend's birthday party. She was 2 years older and came from a well-off family. She was also a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Shawnanna was born in 1987. Her parents, Starling and Shelley Gardner, co-founded a major company called Stampin', specializing in the production and sale of decorative craft items. By 2010, it was reported that their family business, headquartered in Salt Lake City, generated annual revenues of $100 million. Shawnana had a sister named Sarah, who currently held a managerial role in the family business. Growing up in such an affluent household, Shawnana enjoyed a life of luxury and leisure without ever needing to work in her trained profession as a chef. She was described as enthusiastic and somewhat capricious. Initially, according to sources mentioned earlier, Jared was not particularly interested in his new acquaintance. Nevertheless, Shawnana made considerable efforts to entice him with her lavish lifestyle, suggesting they could travel the world together and live freely, as her parents would financially support them. Family life progressed rapidly with the birth of twins just a few months after their first meeting. The couple became engaged quickly, and by early 2010, less than a year after meeting, they celebrated an extravagant wedding in a temple in Salt Lake City, Utah. The Gardner family covered all expenses for both the ceremony and reception. This rapid progression toward marriage was influenced by their religious beliefs, which discouraged cohabitation and lengthy engagements. Following the wedding, the newlyweds settled in Utah. The bride's parents assisted them in purchasing a comfortable home valued at approximately $1 million. Each owned a Mercedes, despite Jared still being a student and Shawnana not working. The couple traveled extensively, sharing numerous photos of their trips, expensive purchases, and leisure activities on social media profiles. According to close acquaintances, Shawnana's parents provided the couple with approximately $10,000 monthly for various expenses and granted them access to their accounts. When Jared completed his degree, his in-laws generously gave him $100,000 to start his own career. In 2013, the couple welcomed twins, a daughter named Abigail and a son named Liam. The family temporarily relocated to Connecticut, but soon after, Liam was diagnosed with a heart condition and lung issues. Doctors recommended moving closer to the sea for the child's health benefits. Consequently, the family moved to Florida and purchased a comfortable two-story home near the coastline at Ponte Vedra Beach, south of Jacksonville. At this time, Shawnana actively managed her social media blog, portraying herself as a loving wife, a caring mother of twins, a professional chef, and an individual passionate about travel and sports. She took fitness seriously and attended the gym nearly every day. Observing her dedication, Jared decided to surprise her by hiring a personal trainer. The scandalous divorce began shortly after this gesture. Clear issues started emerging in the marriage. Even though the couple outwardly pretended everything was fine, Shawnana became disillusioned with their religion and nearly stopped attending church services, while her husband remained a devout member. This difference in religious commitment led to frequent arguments and tension. Reportedly, Shawnana also grew disillusioned with Jared, perceiving him as lazy, having gained weight, and making only half-hearted attempts to launch his business. After completing online courses in programming and design, Jared secured a position at Microsoft, where he began earning independently. A few years later, he advanced to a senior manager role. However, the couple continued to grow increasingly distant, with arguments becoming routine in their household. The situation worsened when Jared accidentally discovered intimate exchanges between his wife and her personal fitness trainer. According to several sources, Shawnana allegedly had an affair, which the trainer confirmed in a phone conversation with Jared. However, Shawnana strongly denied these claims. Jared later contacted Mallory Bowden via email, expressing concern that his wife had become distant and emotionally attached to her gym trainer. Despite this, he showed a willingness to forgive the infidelity in order to preserve their family for the sake of their children. In 2015, after nearly 6 years of marriage, the couple began a contentious and scandalous divorce process. They disagreed over shared assets and custody rights for their children in a far from amicable manner. Jared publicly accused his ex-wife of infidelity, which she categorically denied, stating that the marriage had merely lost its love. In response, she accused him of cruelty and offensive behavior. Shawnana insisted on keeping their home, cars, and bank account funds, arguing that nearly everything they had acquired over the years had been purchased or gifted by her parents. Jared had only begun working less than a year earlier. Before this, he had focused on his studies and unsuccessfully attempted to establish his business using funds from his in-laws. Jared contested her claims, asserting that he was entitled to at least half of their Florida home. Custody of the twins also became a source of numerous disputes. Shawnana alleged that whenever Jared was with the children, he tried to turn them against her, coaching them on what to say about their mother and recording their statements for court. Jared countered by accusing his ex-wife of comprehensive surveillance, installing hidden cameras in their home, tapping his phone calls, and placing a tracker in his car to monitor his movements. Shawnana sought sole custody of the children and exclusive ownership of their seaside home. She also claimed that Jared threatened to withdraw all funds from their children's trust accounts for personal use. Jared responded with allegations that Shawnana evaded taxes by working off the books at her parents' company, receiving tens of thousands of dollars in this manner. New families, old disputes. By the end of 2015, the court mandated joint custody of the children, but this hardly ended the conflicts between Jared and Shawnana. Even after their divorce was officially finalized, they continued appearing in court for nearly 7 more years. This ultimately led to the tragic conclusion of their saga. By this time, both had moved on and started new families, having more children. In 2016, Jared met a woman named Christina, a fellow Microsoft employee living and working in North Carolina. Initially, their interactions were strictly professional. However, they gradually grew closer, and a few months later, Christina moved to Florida to be with Jared. In the fall of 2017, they married, and by February 2019, they welcomed their first child together, a daughter named Bexley. In August 2021, their son London was born. Shawnana also remarried in 2018, tying the knot with Mario Fernandez, a man a year her junior who owned a real estate business. That same year, they welcomed their son, Michael. The family resided in the same house where Shawnana had lived with her first husband, Jared, a house that had previously been a battleground during their court disputes. The presence of new families did not calm the tensions between the ex-spouses, who continued to file lawsuits against each other with new demands. Jared insisted that Shawnana's new husband, Mario, should not be allowed to be with the twins if their mother was absent. Conversely, he wanted his new wife, Christina, to be fully involved in the upbringing of his older children. The last court meeting between Jared and Shawnana occurred 4 months before Jared's death and was exceptionally tense. They exchanged yet another round of mutual accusations and contested rights to their property. Shawnana claimed that Jared was preventing her from using the family's larger, more comfortable vehicle to transport the children because he was more concerned with humiliating her than with the convenience and safety of his own children. At this point, the court granted Shawnana exclusive rights to use the larger vehicle and ordered Jared to pay her $600 in compensation. By agreement between the ex-spouses, Jared picked up the twins on Wednesdays for a family dinner, including their younger sister Bexley. Christina sometimes joined them, but after the birth of London, she spent most of her time with the newborn, choosing not to leave him with babysitters. On Wednesday, February 22nd, Jared followed his usual routine. He took the children to a coastal area after picking them up. After dinner and a stroll, he returned the twins to their mother's house before heading home on his regular route. The trip typically took about 40 minutes, including a deserted stretch of road without streetlights. While driving slowly and cautiously, aware of his 3-year-old daughter asleep in her car seat, Jared encountered an unexpected obstacle around 9 p.m. Suddenly, in the headlights, he saw a tire lying in his lane. He stopped, activated his hazard lights, and got out to move the tire to the side of the road. It was at this moment that gunshots rang out. Jared had no chance to escape. The assailant fired several bullets at close range before fleeing the scene. Fortunately, the child sleeping in the car was unharmed. A nearby passerby heard the shots and cautiously approached, discovering Jared lying in a pool of blood. They immediately called the police and paramedics, but tragically, it was too late to save him. Regarding the investigation and initial suspicions, Christina had called her husband just minutes before the incident. He told her he had just dropped off the children and would be home in about 15 minutes. However, as 30 minutes turned into an hour with no sign of Jared and no answer on his phone, Christina repeatedly tried calling him until she finally received an answer from a police officer, who informed her of what had happened and requested her immediate presence at the Jacksonville Beach Police Station. The investigation team determined that the tire in the road caused Jared's vehicle to stop. They concluded he exited his car to remove it, but was then shot. His 3-year-old daughter remained unharmed in the car, indicating she was not the target. Additionally, no valuables were missing from Jared's vehicle. A wallet containing cash, a phone, and a tablet were left untouched, ruling out robbery as a motive. The theory of robbery emerged almost immediately when investigators inquired whether her husband had any known adversaries, antagonists, or recent disputes. Christina stated that she was unaware of anyone wishing harm upon her husband, aside from his first wife, Shawnana. However, she refrained from making direct accusations without indisputable evidence. The police reported a lack of surveillance footage due to the absence of cameras along the stretch of road where the incident occurred. A witness who heard the shots claimed that they shattered the quiet of the night without being preceded by screeching brakes, loud screams, or any other sounds. They did, however, hear a vehicle speeding away, though nothing was visible in the darkness. Christina's suggestion of Shawnana's potential involvement in the crime seemed plausible to investigators, but was unlikely that she acted directly, especially given her solid alibi. She was at home with her husband, twins, younger son, and parents who were visiting. The police decided to review nearby surveillance cameras. The footage showed an old dark blue Ford F-150 with brown trim entering the area about 15 minutes before the incident and leaving a few minutes after the shots were reported by the witness. Detectives turned to the public for assistance in identifying this vehicle of interest. Jared's family made televised appeals, urging anyone with even minor information related to the case to come forward. The first suspects arrested, Shawnana and her current husband Mario, were repeatedly questioned but vehemently denied any involvement in the murder. Shawnana did not hide that her relationship with her ex-husband was complicated, but insisted that she would never wish harm upon the father of her children. She also shared with media outlets how their 9-year-old twins reacted to the news of their father's death. Abigail cried uncontrollably for hours, while Liam remained in shock and silent for an extended period. It is worth noting that neither Shawnana nor Jared's older children attended his funeral. Christina informed Shawnana that her presence at the ceremony would be highly unwelcome, to which Shawnana responded that if she was not allowed to attend, the twins would not participate in the burial either. It was not until January 2023, nearly a year after Mr. Bregan's murder, that the first suspect was arrested. The police remained silent regarding the progress of the investigation, noting only that it required considerable resources and effort. An exhaustive search for the dark blue Ford F-150 finally yielded results when the vehicle became involved in an accident but left the scene before police arrived. This incident occurred in a crowded area with many witnesses, making it easier to identify the offender on the same day thanks to numerous camera recordings. The car belonged to 62-year-old Henry Tynan, an unemployed man with prior convictions. He faced charges of second-degree premeditated murder using a firearm, participation in a criminal conspiracy with intent to commit murder, and setting up an ambush with obstructions for the victim. Jacksonville Beach Police Chief Jonathan Paul Smith and City Prosecutor Melissa Nelson announced these charges during a press conference. They also revealed that Tynan did not act alone and was cooperating by providing testimony against his accomplices. However, no other names were disclosed at that time to protect the integrity of the ongoing investigation. Understanding the severity of his charges and the lengthy prison term he faced, Tynan chose to cooperate with law enforcement in hopes that his cooperation would be viewed favorably during sentencing and possibly reduce his punishment. Inside information soon leaked to the press, indicating that Tynan had been renting a small house owned by Mario Fernandez, along with a friend. Fernandez's housemate was also questioned, but failed to provide any valuable information about the case, as he had no personal dealings with Fernandez. He merely passed his share of the rent through Henry. Following an extensive search of the house, authorities discovered a concealed pistol in the accused room. Ballistic tests later confirmed that this weapon was used in the murder, further implicating Tynan in the crime. On March 16, 2023, Mario Fernandez was arrested after Tynan pleaded guilty and agreed to testify against Mario, identifying him as the orchestrator of the crime. Consequently, Fernandez faced charges of first-degree murder, criminal conspiracy, and incitement to commit a serious crime. Rumors circulated that Shawnana was the mastermind behind the murder. This was corroborated by her former lover, a fitness trainer, who recounted how she had frequently expressed disdain for her then-husband and wished for his death. A tattoo artist who regularly saw Shawnana also testified. She remembered Shawnana complaining about her constant legal battles with her ex-husband and expressing a desire to silence him permanently. Initially thought to be a grim joke, Shawnana later reiterated her request, signaling serious intent. Shawnana Gardner Fernandez categorically denied all allegations against her. She declared her intention to remain in town and assist with the investigation. However, shortly after her husband's arrest, she relocated to Washington with their twins and youngest son. On August 17, 2023, she faced identical charges as her current husband when she was arrested at her Washington apartment and extradited to Florida to stand trial together with the criminal trio. The motive behind Shawnana's alleged actions included complex relationships with her ex-husband, a desire to avoid joint custody of their 2 children, and ambition to solely possess all disputed assets. The case remains ongoing, with continued legal proceedings against all involved conspirators. Tynan has pleaded guilty to all charges and is actively cooperating with investigators in hopes of receiving leniency. Reports indicate that he is facing at least 15 years in prison, a significant duration given his advanced age, potentially equating to a life sentence. Mario Fernandez has partially admitted his guilt, but has exercised his legal rights by refusing to testify against his wife, Shawnana Gardner Fernandez. Despite vehemently denying all charges against her, prosecutors are pursuing either the death penalty or life imprisonment without parole for both. Currently, Shawnana's 3 children are under the care of their maternal grandparents, Starling and Shelley Gardner, along with their Aunt Sarah. Moving on to the next case. The case of Kathy Krausnack. On February 19, 1982, police were called to the Krausnack family home, where they discovered the body of 29-year-old Kathy Krausnack. An axe was embedded in her head, serving as the only fatal wound. Earlier, Kathy's 30-year-old husband, James Krausnack, had run into a neighbor's house holding their 3-year-old daughter. He was covered in blood and appeared distressed, reporting that his wife showed no signs of life. While crying and agitated, he waited for police to arrive. James told police that he had left for work at Kodak around 6:30 a.m., where he worked as an economist. He spent the day completing routine tasks while his wife, Kathy, and their daughter, Sarah, were still asleep at home. Kathy had planned to spend the day with their daughter. When James returned home around 5 p.m., he noticed the garage door open, the kitchen window broken, and the glass door between the garage and the house shattered. Realizing something was wrong, he went inside and found his wife lying on the bed. He was shocked and momentarily unable to speak. He then noticed his 3-year-old daughter lying next to the bed, unharmed. To ensure her safety, James took his daughter to a neighbor's house. The neighbor opened the door and saw James, frightened and crying. At his request, she called 911, asking them to come quickly because he claimed a murder had occurred. Police spoke to Sarah, who seemed unaware of what had happened. She said she saw a multicolored bad guy on her parents' bed and saw her mother with blood on her face. It is extremely distressing for a child to be left alone in an apartment with a murdered mother for an entire day. This was a disturbing aspect of the case. Fortunately, Sarah was too young to fully comprehend the situation, so it did not greatly affect her mental state. The neighbors did not observe or hear anything unusual. Police investigated the crime scene, but found no significant evidence or clues. The murder weapon, an axe, had been taken from Kathy's family garage, where it had been used to cut the grass. Notably, there were no fingerprints on the axe, suggesting it had been deliberately cleaned. Additionally, forensic experts found no fingerprints inside the house, which was puzzling since 3 people lived there and could have touched many objects. The police found this unusual and assumed that the perpetrator had cleaned the entire house. However, they did notice something strange in the kitchen. A damp bathroom rug was drying in the garage. James claimed that he had no idea why the rug was there and that nothing of note had been found on it. In 1982, forensic techniques did not allow for the collection or analysis of DNA. Police suspected the incident was a botched robbery, theorizing that the attackers may have become frightened and decided to eliminate Kathy, a potential witness. However, some valuables were still intact. Kathy's bag, left in the kitchen, had been emptied onto the floor, but its contents, money, jewelry, and expensive tea sets, were all still there and neatly arranged. This raised an important question. Why did the criminals leave these items behind? Even the cash openly left on the dresser had not been taken. Perhaps the criminal had frightened Kathy, but in that case, fingerprints would have been left on these items. Yet there were none, which was puzzling. This behavior was unusual, and the police noticed these discrepancies, raising suspicions that the crime scene had been staged. Some items were arranged in a manner suggesting they had been deliberately placed there. A crucial reason for dismissing robbery as a motive was that nothing had been stolen. Seasoned police officers who regularly dealt with burglaries immediately recognized that this incident was different. While murders were rare and notable, thefts and robberies occurred almost daily. Police believed that Kathy's death was a premeditated murder. The initial suspect was, of course, her husband, who had discovered her body. Police began investigating James. Friends and acquaintances described the couple as happy, even idealistic. They had both grown up in the same city in Michigan. Kathy came from a family of truck drivers, while James's parents owned a successful carpet store. They met in high school and began dating in college, eventually marrying on May 3, 1974. After their marriage, Kathy continued her studies in economics in Colorado, and in 1978, they celebrated the birth of their daughter, Sarah. Meanwhile, James became interested in further education and pursued a doctorate in economics. James then accepted a teaching position at the University of Lynchburg in Virginia. In 1981, the family relocated to Brighton, New York, where James found work as an economist. Kathy was a devoted and caring mother, always attentive to their daughter. However, friends noticed a significant change in Kathy's mood 6 months before her death. She became unusually irritable and restless, though they did not know the reasons behind her behavior. As police investigated the family's situation, they discovered that things were not as perfect as they initially appeared. The couple kept their problems private, never discussing issues publicly or seeking advice from others, which made it difficult to gather information. However, police found a brochure for marriage counseling in the family car, suggesting ongoing discord in their relationship. Police also contacted James's employer and learned that he had misrepresented his qualifications, claiming to hold a doctorate. This deception led to him being assigned a role for which he was unqualified, resulting in work-related stress and further complicating his situation. James initially cooperated with police and agreed to attend the next questioning session, but he did not appear. Less than 24 hours after the murder, he left the city without informing the police. This action raised suspicions, as it appeared he was intentionally fleeing. Police later discovered that James had gone to his parents' home in Michigan. They located him and questioned him again. He cooperated by providing blood and hair samples for analysis. Unfortunately, DNA testing was not available at the time, so this did not yield any useful results. 10 days after Kathy was found dead in her bed, James hired a lawyer. In 1982, police did not have sufficient evidence to bring any charges. Police focused on verifying James's claim that he had left for work at 6:30 a.m. It was important to determine whether he could have been home at the time of the murder. Forensic examinations indicated that Kathy had died in her sleep between 4:30 and 7:30 a.m., meaning she could have been murdered with an axe shortly after James left for work. While it was possible that the husband had committed the crime before leaving, it was difficult to understand why he would then go to work, leaving their 3-year-old daughter behind. The mother's body remained in the house throughout the day. The investigation stalled, as the evidence collected and documents found did not clarify the events of that morning. James had no clear motive, making a jury trial unlikely. If the prosecution lost, they would not have been able to bring new charges against him. In 1997, James met his old friend Sharon at a trade show. Their relationship quickly blossomed, and James asked her out, which she accepted. Sharon noticed that James was still deeply affected by his past loss. He seemed shocked by the traumatic event. James shared the basics of that terrible day with Sharon, but avoided going into detail, and Sharon did not press him for more information. Their mutual understanding helped strengthen their relationship, and they later married. In 1999, they moved to another city and later relocated across the country. At the same time, police continued their efforts on Kathy's case. New officers re-examined the evidence, leading to the analysis of a large number of items related to the case. The police were committed to finding justice for the woman who had been so brutally murdered. In 2015, the FBI assisted Brighton police in their investigation, which led them to focus on a suspect, Kathy's husband, James. On April 16, 2016, 34 years after the murder, police made a surprise visit to James's home, hoping to meet him and possibly uncover inconsistencies in his previous statements. However, their plan did not go as expected. James appeared calm and welcoming. He chatted with the officers, agreed to have the conversation recorded, and did not request an attorney. They talked for an hour at the kitchen table, but James remained calm throughout. Eventually, one of the police asked him directly if he had anything to do with his wife's death. James became angry and said he would never hurt his wife. Sharon defended him, saying that in all the time they had been together, she had never witnessed any aggressive behavior from him. He was a caring and loving husband who would never lay a hand on her. She firmly believed he was incapable of such cruelty. Sharon also participated in the police interrogation. Throughout the interrogation, she never doubted her husband's innocence. She felt that she had seen his sincere heart and kind nature over the years. Although her views seemed naive, she held these beliefs deeply. She never asked about the fate of James's ex-wife, as she was satisfied with the brief explanation he had given at the beginning of their relationship and never mentioned it again. Police found themselves at a dead end once more, prompting the decision to review all the evidence collected for DNA testing nearly 40 years after the crime. The murder weapon, an axe found in the victim's head, was sent to the FBI for analysis. Unfortunately, they were unable to locate any usable DNA on it because it had been tampered with. This was a significant setback. Police then sought to determine the time of the crime. One of the United States' leading forensic experts, Michael Baden, analyzed all the available information about the body. He concluded that the woman had likely died around 3:30 a.m., based on her body temperature and the amount of undigested food in her stomach. Therefore, when James arrived at work at 6:30 a.m., he would have definitely noticed that something was wrong. Police were skeptical of the botched robbery theory because nothing had been stolen. They questioned why the robbers would kill a woman who was sleeping and did not witness the robbery. This inconsistency led to the filing of murder charges. On November 8, 2019, James was arrested after being charged, but the 67-year-old did not confess to the crime. Police used the estimated time of death to investigate a murder that had occurred 40 years earlier. They found evidence suggesting that a robbery had been staged. With this information, law enforcement in James's case were presented to the jury, focusing on his alleged involvement in the murder of Kathy Krausnack, his first wife. During the investigation, authorities discovered a dangerous criminal named Edler Rabbi, who had lived about a mile and a half from Kathy's home in 1982. Rabbi was notorious for his harmful behavior toward women. Despite being arrested multiple times, Rabbi often received light sentences and served a total of more than 32 years in prison before his death in 2014. He confessed to killing Kathy, but provided many inaccurate details, leading to skepticism about his claims. After each period in custody, he sought new victims, torturing them. His first confirmed murder occurred in 1991 when he strangled a 27-year-old woman named Stephanie Kupczynski. Although he confessed to this crime in 2012, he maintained that he had no intention of killing her and that the situation had spiraled out of control. Shortly before Kathy's murder, Rabbi had been released from prison in the 1980s. He was questioned, and an investigation began, but he was not considered a likely suspect. Police questioned him briefly and then released him. As a result, James's lawyers claimed the police had been negligent. Instead of pursuing the real killer, they focused on blaming the grieving husband, James, whom they considered the prime suspect. This situation had a significant societal impact. It was revealed that not only was the criminal dead by the time the case was revisited, but the police who had investigated it in the 1980s were also deceased, meaning they could not be held accountable for any mistakes. During the original investigation, the police had only spoken to the murderer once and then disregarded him entirely. Since Edler Rabbi had passed away, he could not be questioned to clarify his role in the case. Nevertheless, many involved in the investigation still questioned whether he was connected to Kathy's murder. Although he confessed to killing Kathy before his death, numerous inconsistencies arose in his account, particularly regarding the handwriting, which did not match his at all. This conclusion was reached by all the experts who examined the case. First, he had a history of rape rather than robbery, yet no signs of sexual assault were found. Additionally, the murder weapon, an axe, was not typical of his methods, and the handwriting was evidently different. As a result, police did not consider him a suspect. Years ago, the prosecution had leaned toward the theory that Kathy's husband was her killer rather than a nearby maniac. During the trial, the prosecutor presented the time of death as crucial evidence. However, several defense experts disagreed with the claim that Kathy died early, with most believing it occurred before 6:30 in the morning. It was believed that Kathy died at 6:30 a.m., after her husband had left for work. The investigation was complicated by the fact that Kathy was under an electric blanket, and it was unclear whether it was on or off at the time of her death. If it was on, the temperature it reached was unknown. Experts attempted to estimate the time of death by analyzing the drop in body temperature. Ultimately, there is no reliable method for determining the exact time of death, and experts have differed, resulting in a margin of error of several hours. Another piece of evidence cited by police was a shoe imprint found pressing down on a garbage bag at the crime scene. This imprint resembled the shoes worn by Kathy's husband, who was absent at the time of her death. However, this evidence alone was not sufficient to establish his guilt. The prosecutor argued that the husband was the only possible suspect because he had a motive arising from family issues. After lengthy deliberations at the hearing, the verdict was announced in court. The jury was unanimous in only one opinion, that the crime was too confusing and contradictory, and the evidence too dubious and easily dismissed. Despite this, James Krausnak was convicted of second-degree murder in November 2022 and sentenced to 25 years in prison. The verdict came as a shock to many, particularly those close to James who knew him well. They had remained certain that James was not guilty because there was no substantial evidence of his involvement. James himself also maintained his innocence. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into cold case investigations. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video. And remember, the search for truth never stops.